If you like the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this.
Men who caught their partner cheating, what happened? This is probably going to get buried, but I still want to share my story. Me and my ex were together for 6 years. We have a daughter together, found out she was pregnant after high school. We had our own apartment together. At one point, one of her guy friends, who we'll call Alex, needed a place to stay after getting evicted from his place. I wasn't too keen on the idea, but I am nice and give to many people the benefit of the doubt. So I agreed to let him crash on our couch. A few weeks go by and my relationship with my ex starts to decline. She seemed to have no interest in me. Sex life was non-existent. I tried communicating with her and asked her what was going on, but she would swear up and down that nothing was wrong and that she was happy. I wasn't convinced. Some days me and Alex would sit on the couch and play video games together or watch YouTube videos. One day my ex walks out of our bedroom wearing nothing but a t-shirt and a thong. I wasn't okay with this since Alex could see too. I confronted her and asked her why the hell she did that when she knew Alex was out there too. She claimed she was doing laundry and had nothing else to wear. I didn't believe her, but I didn't want to fight. So I let it slide. A few days later she does the same thing again, except this time she comes out of the room wearing nothing but a towel that was too small for her, so it showed half her ass. I was livid at this point. I knew she had clean cloths in our room because I folded them and put them away the day before. At this point I knew there was something going on. I knew she wasn't going to tell me the truth at this point. So I waited till she was asleep and I went through her phone. And my suspicions were comforted. She was texting her best friend of all the things she was doing to tease him. Such as bend over in front of him with no underwear on. Would randomly flash him her boobs, as a joke. Then she told her friend on how they finally had sex. How she told him she was taking a shower. Went into our room, turned the shower on, came back out naked and asked him, "You joining me or not?" At that point I couldn't read anymore. The next morning I confronted her after Alex left for work. She got mad at me for going through her phone. I called bullshit and said she's just mad she got caught. After a few hours of talking I decided to forgive her. I know dumb, I told her Alex needed to be out before the end of tomorrow. He left and I thought everything was going to go back to normal. A few months go by and she told me her and her best friend are going on a trip to visit a friend. I stayed home so I could take care of our daughter. Well, the day before she was going to come home she texted me saying she wasn't coming back and that she found new love. Take a wild guess who the new love was. Yup, Alex. I had to break the lease of my apartment because I couldn't afford it on my own and had to move back in with my parents. I took care of my daughter for 2 years on my own until she moved back to town. Married and had another kid. I worked split custody with her so we could have a legal agreement and to make sure she doesn't try to run off with her. We worked at the same place and started dating. We ended up moving in together not long after. We were young and dumb at that stage. Wasn't long after that she started to become distant. I tried to hit her up about it but she just kept brushing it off. Eventually she started going into temper tantrums over the smallest things, and I couldn't take it anymore so we ended up breaking up and I moved back to my parents' place. A week or so later she called me to tell me she was pregnant. I was 22 at the time and was shitting myself, but we decided to sit down and talk about it. After the talk we decided we'd give the relationship another shot, for the baby's sake. Fast forward to a few weeks later and sure enough the same shit starts happening. She began staying at work later, or starting earlier. It was round about this point a couple of my coworkers who I was close with came to me and said they had suspicions that my so had something going on with one of the other guys we worked with. By then I'd already had my suspicions something was up, so I went around to her place and asked her about it. She stated they were just friends, that nothing was going on, etc. I wasn't buying it. So I went straight to the guy and asked him. He straight up told me they had been seeing each other for a few months. He even had messages on his phone from her saying there was nothing going on between her and myself. He said he had no idea her and I were working on things because she'd told him otherwise. I thanked him for his honesty and left. I went back to her, told her I knew the truth, which she still denied. I told her when the baby is born I'd want a DNA test, and I went home. The child did turn out to be mine, and he's the best thing that ever happened to me. It took a few years, but her and I ended up putting that shit behind us as we both didn't want to put the child between two parents that hated each other. I wouldn't say we are friends now, but we get along a lot better than when we were together. I got a huge phone bill after she went on a girls-only weekend cruise, so because the mobile bills was on my name I could access the itemized records. I found a mobile number being texted and phoned all the time, for the last 3 months. At this point I started to suspect something was not right as she would go out on girls-only nights and stay out till about 10 p.m. Then it started getting later and later until one morning till 5 a.m. Being a good husband as always, I stayed home with my 2 boys while she is out partying. It all changed this one night, again after I was told girls' night out in town and sleep over at someone's apartment. Now I am sure like a lot of relationships we had sex toys in our bedroom, and so on this very same night I was sorting some shared wardrobe space out and thought to look inside the bag of toys as we haven't been using it a lot lately, probably due to what's going on at that very moment. I found that some of the toys are missing, and just right there I realized this is real. Now my next move was not my finest moment of all time, but to eliminate all excuses I checked all her drawers and wardrobe space to make sure she can spin me some bullshit story, i.e. it was under my clothes or something along those lines. I could not find anything. Anyway, went to bed and she turned up around 9 a.m. the next morning as we had stuff planned. So I watched the movements in and out of our room as the unpacking goes on, and I went in an hour or so later to find the toys hidden under some clothes which was not there earlier on. I decided to leave it there to see if she moves it back into the toy bag. In a couple of hours it shifted into the bag. It was confirmed in my mind, but I had to deal with the hurt in my heart, so I chose to park it for the day. That night I checked her phone while she was asleep and found photos of this guy with his shirt off lying in what I would say a hotel room. All the text messages has also been deleted and no trail at all, but the phone records say otherwise. Next day, I grew some balls and decided to ring this guy. He told me that he was a warehouse boy at the same company she is working, and he gave me his name. That night I confronted her, then she first denied it until I gave her the phone records and his name. She finally admitted it but said that they only kissed at her workplace and nothing else happened. I told her of all the evidence I had and she made it out that it was my fault and she felt violated for me going through her things in her phone. I tried to work things out and was prepared to give her a second chance, but she was not interested as she was wanting to find herself. A few days later I went on to see a psychiatrist to help me deal with the hurt, as this is the greatest hurt one can have and there is this stigma that men don't hurt. Well, I have experienced it firsthand. We were married for 11 years and they are still seeing each other, but apparently the relationship is rocky. This will be worth the read. Guaranteed. Things just didn't feel right and I suspected something was happening. I downloaded an app to an extra iPhone I had. This app allowed me to set the iPhone to a time that would record any audio. I set the iPhone to record while she was driving home and then I hid the iPhone in the car by the driver's seat. After I retrieved my extra iPhone I heard her talking to another guy. She had told me that she was going into work that day but she hadn't. She had taken the day and went over to his house and had sex all day long. I got to hear the play-by-play recap. Devastating to say the least. After gathering myself I went into the living room where she was sitting while she was texting someone, and played the file for her. As you can guess, pandemonium ensued. She refused to tell me who it was. I suspected it was someone at her place of employment. This next part was a bit resourceful on my end. I knew the date and time that the phone call had occurred. I decided to go to a cell phone kiosk in the mall and obtain the information. They weren't just gonna give it to me, so I do think of a good way to get it out of them. I played this next part pretty well. I approached the kiosk looking flustered. When one of the employees asked me if I needed help, I hurriedly explained to them that I had smashed my phone and I couldn't make out the phone number for a business call that I needed to call into shortly. I continued to tell them that I had talked to this person earlier that week. They agreed to help and I gave them the date and time the phone call occurred. I wrote the number down and returned to my vehicle. I used the search bar on Facebook. I entered the phone number. Lo and behold, up pops her boss. I decided to then give him a call. The phone continued to ring and he never answered it. I left him a voicemail message which stated who I was and why I was calling and that we needed to speak. He never returned my phone call. Fast forward, 6 months after our divorce was finalized, she switched jobs and opted to give up a majority of her custody of our 2 children and move across the country to Dallas for an amazing job. She's now remarried. Not to her ex-boss. The guy actually seems pretty cool. Hopefully he knows what he hitched his wagon to. Despite this horrible experience, I am not totally opposed to getting remarried. I am just extremely cautious and guarded. I have met an amazing person that brings a lot of happiness to my life. We'll see where this goes. 4 years ago, I was young and living with my girlfriend and her family at the time. She was in school and working a part-time job, I a full-time job. I didn't have a car, so it was tough for me to get around in the city with little to no bus routes. I began to notice that she had been coming home quite late from her work, and that the passenger seat in her car was always in a position I didn't sit at when she dropped me off from work. Naturally, I had my suspicions and she would always say that she had to talk to her manager, or that they closed late. This made it even more suspicious knowing that her manager leaves early in the afternoon, and that her section of the grocery store, hot foods, would close long before the store did at night. I kept asking about it until eventually she came home one night and took me for a drive. She said she had something to tell me but couldn't get it out. I asked if she was cheating on me and she confirmed that she had been. She had been spending time with a guy she worked with and they would make out in her car, thus the seat change. I was honestly not as upset as I was when I wasn't 100% sure of that happening. She told me it wouldn't happen again, and reluctantly I believed her. I've always had low self-esteem and would take most of her abuse because she was quite acceptable in many other areas. Unfortunately, my home was a few hours away, and there was no way to get there at this time of night, so I was forced to stay overnight on the couch. When I woke up, I went to work, and let everything pass, rather than make an effort to leave. Things seemed okay until shortly before Christmas she gave me her phone for some reason, can't remember why at this point, and I saw that she had been sexting back and forth with another guy from work. I threw the phone on her bed, went to sleep, and called my parents the next morning. They drove 3 hours to pick me up, while I woke up early, collected my things, and walked to the nearest community center and sat waiting. The next day my ex showed up at my house in tears begging for me back. I slammed the door in her face and didn't look back. I'm with the love of my life now and I couldn't be happier. It was always quite an abusive relationship, but that's another story, and I'm glad that I've gotten past that. She caused many issues for me in learning to trust myself, but that has since disappeared. My girlfriend and I had just rented a house and it was move-in day. She worked at a bar and had said that she would be working late. This was a pain in the ass because she had all of the bedding in her car. I moved in most of the stuff by myself and had a friend help with the bigger stuff. My mattress didn't fit in the house, so I was sleeping on the floor with a couple towels as a blanket. This wasn't ideal. I couldn't sleep and I was getting pissed because it was 3 a.m. and she still hadn't arrived with my blankets. I had to work in 4 hours and had it. I was going to drive to her work and get the blankets myself. I showed up and there were only 2 cars in the parking lot. Hers and the manager's. I heard loud music coming from inside and walked up to the door. Looked inside and I could see the DJ booth lit up. Pulled on the door, Locked. I saw people moving inside and knocked. The music was too loud. I had a gut feeling that something was very wrong. At this point I thought I saw the shadowy figures making out on the DJ equipment. I was infused with adrenaline and ran around the back of the bar to the patio. Somehow, I climbed the 10-foot fence and hopped over the barbed wire in what seemed like an instant. I was on the other side of the fence looking through the glass doors. I could clearly see that the shadows were making out. I just couldn't see who they were. At that point the shadows fell to the floor and I heard the very distinct sex noise that she always made. I banged on the glass and yelled, "I see you." What the fuck? They stayed hidden. I yelled again, "Hey. Come out here." What the fuck? They remained hidden. The music stopped. I heard the guy say something and then it stopped. I yelled, "Hey, either you come out. Or I am coming in. What's one of these big windows cost? A few grand. Fuck it. You have 30 seconds to reply." Then I heard the guy say, "He wouldn't." She said, "He would." I saw a door open on the other side of the bar and I ran for the fence and jumped over it. I ran through the parking lot and saw my girlfriend looking super pissed. She was yelling at me for embarrassing her in front of her boss. She explained to me that it wasn't her and that it was his fiancé. She had too many drinks and was sleeping it off upstairs in the office. Admittedly, his fiancé had the same build and haircut as my GF at the time. For a split second I thought, OMG. I'm such an ass. Then I remembered the noise she made. At this point I decided to see how far she was willing to go. I apologized. The manager came out to see if everything was okay. His body language was very suspicious, as if he was expecting me to attack him. I apologized to him and said I was sorry if I frightened him and his fiancé. I left. The next day I said, "I feel super bad about what happened. I must have scared the crap out of his fiancé. I am going to go apologize." My GF said in a nervous way, "No. It's better if you stay away from there, you are banned." I said, "Oh, no problem. I'll just Facebook her when I get home." I sent his fiancé a message saying, "Hey, sorry I interrupted you and your fiancé having sex in the DJ booth last night. I thought it was my GF and some guy." I got an immediate response of, "What? What the fuck are you talking about?" Followed by 3 phone calls. I explained what I saw to her and she was so pissed sad. I'm sure she would kick his ass for me. This was so much better than me kicking his ass in that parking lot. He had just bought a house with her and moved all of his stuff in. She was an awesome girl and she was about to marry a total douchebag. I avoided an assault charge, didn't have to get my hands dirty at all. His ex-fiancé would do all the life ruining for me and all I had to do was kick my ex-GF out of our new house. Easy enough since I didn't unpack her shit. 2 seconds after I hung up with his soon-to-be ex-fiancé my GF came bursting in the door. She was crying and confessing and begging me not to send the message. I laughed in her face and said, "I knew it the whole time. It's already done. Congratulations on ruining 2 relationships, your job, and your place to live in one night. Get the fuck out." She begged me to stay, saying she had nowhere to go. I gave her the dog's old blanket and a nasty throw pillow and told her to sleep in her car. I owned everything in the house. She had nothing but a couple bags of clothing and a shitty car. Never saw her again. Don't care what happened to her. About 3 months later I met an amazing woman and we got engaged 6 months after that. Married in 2 years and 9 years later, still married to the most amazing woman. We have a nice house and the same dog. I have been cheated on not once, but twice. Yeah, I get it. I'm a glutton for punishment. The first time around I was very young, sheltered and naive. I grew up in a religious community where getting married at a young age was common and even encouraged, so I married the first woman I had a real relationship with in my early 20s. I should have known from the disaster that our wedding was, that the marriage wasn't going to last. On the outside we were the ideal, young married couple. We were active in our community, mentored other couples and gave the appearance that we would last. But, after about a year she started to grow distant. She had gotten another position where she worked and had gotten close to a female coworker. I started to get a bad gut feeling after spending several days on an annual camping trip with her dad for Father's Day. I came home and it just didn't feel right. Over the next few weeks my suspicions grew as she started to become more distant and secretive. I confronted her a couple of times, point blank asking her if she was having an affair. She assured me she wasn't, and would never have an affair because she loved me and I was the only one for her. I talked to all of my friends and they all assured me I was crazy. There was no way my wife would be cheating on me. After 2 months my gut kept telling me that something wasn't right, but she always had a way to explain away my suspicions. I was working for the school district and on summer break, working at her family farm to make some extra money while they were away on vacation. She insisted on staying at our house instead of with me there, even though it was closer to her work. Then, she goes on a road trip with her female coworker because she was struggling with her marriage. I couldn't deal with my suspicions, so I hacked into her email account the same day that she sent herself an email from her work address, the secure access link, username and password, so she could check her work emails from home. This of course gave me access to her work email, which had hundreds of emails back and forth from her female coworker, who was actually a much older, married man expecting his first child. I printed the emails and confronted her as soon as she got home. She denied it all, even with proof. Our religious community was rocked. My pastor insisted on not getting a divorce, but to work it out. She swore she would break off the affair, but needed a break and she moved out. After a horrible few months where I was encouraged to reconcile with her because of our shared faith, our marriage was over. She insisted on a divorce, but again swore it wasn't because she was still seeing this man. Our religious community backed this, completely changing their philosophy on divorce. Flash forward several months and a friend tells me to check Craigslist missed connections. There was a post from my ex-wife from the friend of the spouse of the man she had an affair with. It laid out the entire almost year-long affair and how she was responsible for ending a marriage. I ended up getting in contact with the spouse and she told me that my ex never broke off the affair and that she had lied to me and all of our friends. What's worse is that during our separation she racked up a ton of debt on our credit cards, which she agreed to pay off in our divorce papers but never did, destroying my credit. She also never paid her taxes, which sent the IRS after me. Needless to say, I no longer consider myself a religious person and could have saved myself a lot of trouble had I just divorced her right away. The second time, nearly 10 years later, all of the red flags were there, but I ignored them all. 3 months into dating she gets drunk and confesses that she lied to me about having business partners in town and needing to show them around. It was in fact an ex of hers and they went on several dates. I stupidly forgave her for this and we moved on with our relationship, but it never felt right knowing that she could so easily lie to me. She was emotionally abusive and it was a toxic relationship where we broke up and got back together a few times. She'd always disappear from time to time and be unreachable. She'd start fights for no reason and would constantly go back on her promises. She was growing particularly distant and cold and I confronted her on it. She ended the relationship via text while I was at work. The next weekend, a friend of mine who is a bartender asked if I was still dating this woman. I told them that we had broken up days earlier. The look on their face was somewhere between disgust and sadness as they told me that they had seen her tongue deep with a guy at a bar the week prior, while we were still together. Found out later from a mutual friend that she had been cheating on me the entire time we were together.